All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's NBA pre-lock show, and we only have 3 games. And also, there's no guests. It's just me today. So if you're upset about that, sorry in advance. But it's a decent 3-game slate. We have a good amount of news, uh, some Q tags that will definitely shake up the slate if they end up getting ruled out. But I like it all the same. Things are a little crazy here in North Carolina. We got a ton of snow, but we're alive and well. I'm not mad about it. Chad, Rodney, Joanna, Cujo, good to see y'all. Thomas, what's up? Let's just jump right into the games. I don't have too much to say. Like, not too much has been going on lately. I'm not going to read that one. All right, first things first. Let's look at the slate as a whole. So the way I see it is this first game, we have a elite defense of the Rockets going up against the Pacers. So automatically going to lean towards Rockets. And then the Pacers are going to be lower owned, and so that's what makes them a little bit more interesting. We'll talk about some spots there that I like. That second game, we have an elite defense in the Minnesota Timberwolves going up against the Grizzlies. So I'm going to like the Timberwolves a bit more. The Memphis guys aren't that low owned, but it's a high total game, so I understand the ownership. I'm trying to match the field on a couple of those guys, but I'm automatically not going to try and force too much of them because of the matchup. And then this last game is interesting to me. Closest spread, totals low, but neither one of these defenses are elite. They're not bad defenses, but they're not the Timberwolves or the Rockets. So this is the game that I did want to maybe force more exposure to than some of the other spots on the slate. So that's just kind of how I'm thinking about it. 2 really good teams against 2 bad teams, and then one game that should be pretty close to each other. Good to see everyone in the chat, though. All right, first things first, we have the Rockets going up against the Pacers. 6.5 point spread, 218.5 point total, low total, but that doesn't matter too much on a 3-gamer. The important thing here is for the Rockets, they are without Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant does all of the scoring for Houston. Now they have to figure out what to do without him. Steven Adams has been out for a while now, but we've been attacking this team with bigs, and it's been working because Steven Adams is that much of a defensive juggernaut. So this is still a good defensive team, but they can't rebound to save their life. Şengün is still getting like 10 to 11 rebounds, but no one else is really doing it. So we'll talk more about that for why that makes the Pacers a little bit more interesting. Şengün without Kevin Durant going up against the Pacers, a team who is not a great rebounding team either. It's just a smash spot for me. He's one of my favorite studs on the slate. He's my highest owned stud on the slate. He's showing up in 77% of lineups. You can overthink it. He can fail. Anyone can, but it's a good spot that I want to be over the field on. And so that's the way I'm playing that situation. Amen Thompson always makes me a little nervous. He's been better. He's been more consistent, but I just never feel super safe with him. But fast-paced game, should be more involved about KD. He's someone I like having exposure to, so I put a 35% min on him, but clearly, as you can tell, I don't feel overly passionate about it. Let's see, how much is Amen actually showing up? I don't think he's actually showing... Yeah, he's only showing up in 16% of lineups, even with that 35% min. He wasn't showing up at all without that min. So, like I said, if it was a guy like Kawhi, who I like a lot, if he wasn't showing up more, I would tinker with the DS to try and get him to show up more. But 16%, 24 of my lineups will still have a chance if he pops off tonight in this spot. 8,200 guy. We're not getting an extreme value here. I like him, but I don't love him, if that doesn't make sense. Jabari Smith, 6,400 player here. Another guy I'm just kind of meh on. It's just a decent spot. I have a 20% min on him. Wanted to show up slightly over the field, but there's a lot of forwards on this slate I like. He's just another one of them that I think are viable. So I'm not really trying to go too crazy with fades on a 3-gamer. And he was someone I just want to match the field on. He's been in decent form. He's been good. And again, like, this is a defense that's not great against bigs. And so I wanted to prioritize them a bit more. Terry Eason is the guy we're expecting to see the really biggest increase in production with KD out. He pops up in 49% of my lineups. He was showing up a bit more. Let me see if I need to boost that a little bit. I'm fine with this. Terry Eason showing up in 45% of lineups. I'll still be over the field, but he won't ruin my night if he does nothing. a lot of these Rockets, just because KD does so much, it's just hard for me to feel super strong because it's really just going to be a hot hand approach here outside of Şengün. And then Reed Shepherd, man, I had a 45% min. I was over the field. I was feeling good about him. And then we got the news that he's going to start for KD. 4,900 player who has a decent point per minute, already a decent usage rate guy, now starting. I don't think it will change his minutes too much, but it should solidify that. And once again, a good matchup for him. So I had the 50% min on him earlier, but you don't need it at this point because his projection has gone up so much. He shows up in 89% of lineups. I hate it. I don't love it. He's super chalky. I see you in the chat. Jace is like, I'm not playing Reed Shepherd. Someone else mentioned Reed too. I think it was Tijuana. Yeah, he mentioned that he doesn't love the ownership on Reed Shepherd, and I get it. But on a 3-gamer, a $4,900 player seeing consistent minutes in a situation like this in a soft matchup, I can't really find a great reason to fade it besides just fading the ownership, which is always a valid argument for me. But clearly, I'm not doing that with him being in 89% of my lineups. And then that's it. Okogie's interesting. I put a 5% min on him, just looking like a dart throw. But let's see if he even shows up. Yeah, he does. He shows up in about 5% of lineups. Even Jayshawn Tate shows up in 1% of lineups too. Those are just, Tate is one that I guess the DS just likes a little bit, adding him into the mix, but he doesn't typically see too many minutes, but maybe there's a chance he can see more in a blowout, and or if the coach just decides to give him more minutes with Kevin Durant out. Okogie's someone I just like having a little bit more exposure to. He has an awful points per minute at 0.68. But at low ownership, someone that can get hot, just a random dart throw. But there's lower owned guys I like a lot more than him. So it's just me trying to get a little weird on a 3-gamer, trying to get different. And you'll see, I like to take a few of those dart throws type of plays at low ownership. If you're playing 150 lineups, you see this a lot on 3-gamers where it's just some rando who ends up there for no real logical reason. So I just like getting exposure to some of those weird plays. Other side of this game is a tough matchup. Houston's a really good defense, and the Pacers only have Obi Toppin out, and he's been out for a long time. So we're not really getting any injury news that's boosting anyone else up. It's really just these guys going head first into a really tough matchup. The difference is, though, like we've been saying, I've been playing bigs against the Rockets, and it's kind of been working. So I'm not trying to go away from that, but I'm also not losing my mind trying to do it. I have a 15% min on Pascal Siakam. He wasn't quite showing up around that amount when I looked earlier. Let's see. Yeah, even with a 15% min, he's not showing up at all in lineups. And it's really just his price tag. 8,600 is hard to fit in with some of the other guys I'm forcing exposure to. Which usually just means it's not the right play. So it's just gonna, and like I said, there are spots like Rockets, Timberwolves, this third game. Those are plays I'm gonna fight for. Some of these lower owned guys on the other side of these games, I'm not. So I like Siakam, but the DS doesn't like it, even with a 15% min. So I'm not gonna fight with it too much. Frustrating, but it is what it is. Nembhard, I personally didn't love Andrew Nembhard as a play with this team healthier. Like I keep saying, Rockets are a good defense. I'm only really comfortable attacking them with bigs, but the sim model liked Andrew Nembhard a good amount. So we look at 7,100 sim model, highest chance of 7x value outside of Julius Randle, who's questionable. So I see those numbers, stands out in comparison to everyone in his price range. I'm going to attack it, even if it doesn't make sense to me. I'm just going to follow the sim on that. So I have a 20% min on him. Technically a leverage play. I didn't write him up as that, though, mostly because he's still only showing up in 10% of my lineups. So at least he's showing up. I'm okay with that. Around field weight exposure, just knowing that there's some upside there is something that I just wanted to highlight. The rest of these guys, Mathurin, Nesmith, Walker, I can't get on board with them. I know Mathurin has upside, but I usually like having exposure to him in softer matchups. Same thing with Nesmith. I never really love Walker. Jay Huff is the real question mark and concern. He is a big going up against this Houston team. I'm just not a Jay Huff guy. Maybe if he saw 30 minutes tonight, I'll feel better about it, but I don't believe he will. The thing is, the DS loves him. He's currently in 27% of my lineups, more than triple the field on Jay Huff. But I didn't do anything to that, primarily because I am comfortable playing bigs against this Rockets team right now. And so the rebounds should be there. We just need him to score a little bit more to get us there. So it's one of those leverage plays that the DS likes that I am comfortable with. Rodney, three gamers are kind of weird. You can take some, like, one or two spots to get off of the ownership, but it will burn you real fast if it doesn't come through. But it is just like an easy way to get a relatively big win if the chalk fails. Like, that does happen on some slates. It's just not something that happens often, which is why I usually play it a little bit safer and just match the field on some of the chalk I don't love. And I'll get different with some of the lower owned plays, which we haven't gotten to yet. So if someone's like, hey, I'm going to fade the chalkiest guy on the slate, that's one of the easiest ways to get a takedown. So I'm never going to argue with it. Yeah, Tijuana. Sometimes Jesus says something. I'm like, all right, I'll listen. I don't understand it, but I'll listen to you. Darius said, do you like Okogie tonight? I missed the first part. I don't love Okogie. No, I just took a shot on him at super low ownership and someone who sees 20 plus minutes. I don't think he's a great play, though. He's just one of those low owned dart throws. I'm going to rerun too, just to make sure it has all my changes in there. And then, yeah, it's pretty much the Pacers. Next up, we have the highest game total on the slate, but literally the hardest game to talk about. The reason why the slate's a little tough to have a full grip on is because of the Q tags from Minnesota. Anthony Edwards is questionable. He's the stud on this team in a great matchup against Memphis. If he is out, we should see Mike Conley start, and then usage rate boost to everybody else like Randall, Gobert, Reed, Dante, Jaden McDaniels. It's a similar situation to KD being out. Everybody eats in that situation. And then Julius Randle is questionable too. That would be a massive boost to Naz Reid, who's already in a really good spot. And then, similar to Ant, a nice boost to guys like Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels. Just, he's a high usage guy, so him not being on the court matters a lot. So, good spot. We love the Timberwolves tonight. We just don't know who's actually going to be on the court. Oh, did we get the Edwards news? Are they in? That's so boring. I think y'all are right, though. All right, let's see. Yeah, we got that news a minute ago. Julius Randle available, Anthony Edwards available. That kind of sucks, but it's okay. It's fine. This is a really good spot for Julius Randle. Like I said, the sim model likes him a decent amount. Like the highest chance of hitting 7x, just because he literally is the only guy who has a chance of that in the sim model above 8K. Doesn't mean that's going to be the case, but that's someone I want to make sure I have exposure to. I'll put a 30% min on him. I'll try and keep this 25% min on Ant, but I know the DS doesn't love him too much. The center situation on this slate is kind of weird. Just outside of Şengün, let's look at it. We have Şengün's the highest owned center because he's actually the only center in a really soft matchup. All of the other matchups are brutal for bigs. So I like taking a shot on a few of the centers on this slate, just trying to find a way to get different. I love Şengün, and you can play more than one center on a slate, but the matchup's not ideal for the centers in some of the other games. And so I have a 15% min on Rudy Gobert, not because I love him, but he's just a center that's different than Embiid, Şengün, and there's another chalky big too that I'm blanking on, but 15% min just for that. Rudy Gobert usually does well in soft matchups. I mentioned with Edey out, the Memphis is a softer matchup. It's still not the softest because they play at a relatively slow pace, but is a spot I like having exposure to, but not a play I feel like you have to have. Naz Reid at 6,300 is a bit more interesting because he's a bit more aggressive than a guy like Rudy Gobert. He would have been better if there was that injury news, but he's still a very solid play. Like I've said before, I like the Rockets, I like the Timberwolves, and then that last game. So I'm trying to get as much exposure as possible to this team. So I have a lot of different variations for some winning lineups. So 30% min on Naz Reid, a little pricey for my taste, but it makes sense just given the context of the slate. Similar situation with Dante DiVincenzo and Jaden McDaniels. They're really just guys in the grand scheme of things, but they're 6K, relatively cheap, relatively active, but we just need one of them to get hot. They don't have anywhere close to as high as a points per minute production as guys like Julius Randle or Anthony Edwards or Naz Reid even, but they play a ton of minutes. They both see more than 30. And so if they get hot for even a quarter on top of their assist and rebounding production, they can still be in a nuts lineup. So on a 3-gamer, guys like this, especially when they're getting ownership, that 15+% range, softer side of a matchup, I'm just going to match the field or try to. So 20% min on Jaden McDaniels and 25% min on Dante DiVincenzo. Now let's look at who's actually showing up because that's what matters. Julius Randle is showing up in 40% of lineups. Technically a leverage play. Again, I like that. Sim models on him. Good matchup. That's a good play for me. Naz Reid is not showing up with the 30% min, but he's showing up in 23%, which is right at field weight exposure. That's enough for me not to tinker with it too much. Jaden McDaniels is showing up in 24% of lineups, so we're slightly over the field there. I like that too. That's fine. Anthony Edwards is only showing up in 11% of lineups. That means I'm going to be significantly under the field on Anthony Edwards. But like I said, I like the other studs on this slate more. We have Şengün, who has injuries that make him a much more viable play. The Sixers have just been hot in a closer and better game environment that I think will be closer. And then there's Kawhi, who's my actual favorite stud on the slate. So just given all that information, I was always going to be under on Ant. But we know he can pop off. So it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being the guy on this slate. It's just not the one I'm going to force exposure to. Dante DiVincenzo, I have that 25% min on. He's only showing up in 9% of lineups. So I'll actually be under the field on him too. And I don't care enough about him to force that. Might regret it. And then Rudy Gobert, I have that 15% min on him, but he's only showing up in 2% of lineups. And there are other centers like Şengün I want to prioritize. And I already kind of touched on it too. The center matchups aren't as great as they typically are on most slates. And so if the DS doesn't like those 2 center builds because it wants to put in some of the value options like Ty Jerome, let's see, who else is it putting in there? Ooh, Kobe Sanders, don't love that. Jalen Wells also don't love that. But you can tell the DS is just trying to find value plays to put in the util spot. It has like John Collins in here a little bit, TJ McConnell. There's Zubac. Okay, that's better. Reed Shepherd shows up there too. It clearly just doesn't like the double big build too much. And so I'm not going to force it. Like that's something I know. Like the matchups aren't that great for them. If I could find a way to get like Şengün and Embiid, that would be awesome. But I keep saying that. Not going to force the issue there. Memphis. They are still missing a ton of bodies. Santi Aldama is out. John Concher is out. And then the rest of these guys like Ja Morant, Scottie Pippen, Zach Edey, they've all been out for a while. So no reason to really touch on that. Aldama being out, though, is a boost to the wings and bigs like Jalen Wells, Landale, Gigi. All those guys see a boost. The issue with Memphis is that they have a large rotation. They play everybody. And really, the only guy who sees more than 30 minutes is Jaren Jackson Jr. So a bit of a tough spot for any of these guys just because they don't see consistent minutes. And that's the scary part with them. They're also in a really tough matchup against the Timberwolves. We know how good they are just across the board. So not too much like to pick on too much, but no one here is too expensive. So I kind of view the Grizzlies as just more of like a lineup fillers, guys who do a lot of different things and can get there in their price range. But I don't want to see too many Grizzlies all in the same lineup because that's just not That's not ideal here. We'll start with Jaren Jackson Jr. Pop up the sim. He shows up. Okay, like 3.37% chance to 6.5x. It's kind of in par with like your Zubox and Go Bears. Nothing too insane. I don't love the matchup though. And so ultimately, he's the guy I didn't force exposure to. Earlier, I did try and just put like a 20% min on him, match the field, but it didn't work out. So feels a little tough to say, but I am going to end up fading Jaren Jackson Jr. tonight. 20% owned player. Gotta take some risk on these 3 gamers, and he's not showing up naturally, and I don't care enough about him to force exposure to him. So that's gonna have to be the one for me. Jock Landale is interesting. We've seen him produce pretty well, but this is a very tough matchup against the Timberwolves. Close to 10% ownership. Let me look a little bit closer at this. Yeah, I can't get there on this slate. Cam Spencer, I've been on in softer spots, but I don't love the matchup here, so I'm not going there. Cedric Coward, though, he's someone who does have upside, and he doesn't have to score a ton to end up in the Nuts lineup. That's the kind of guy I want to make sure I have exposure to on a 3-game slate. Someone who just does a little bit of everything and can get rebounds, can get assists, even if he's the one not being the primary scorer, even though he does score at a pretty decent rate too. So I put a 30% min on Coward, and then he's showing up in 31% of lineups. So I'm over the field there, and I like him as a lineup filler. Vince Williams, I'm pretty meh on. I put a 20% min on him. Sim liked him a little. He's cheap. Like I said, he's just another lineup filler. He's seeing ownership. And so I didn't want to be without a 4K guy who does potentially pop off here, even though I don't love the spot. We look at him. Vince Williams shows up in about 23% of lineups. Let's see, 4,200. Yeah, you see Jay Huff right here popping in the sim. And then there's Vince Williams right underneath him. It's not this like it stands out in the sim so much, but it's enough for me to take notice and want to get a little bit of exposure to. GG Jackson, I'm never really a GG guy unless Jaren Jackson Jr. is out, but he is seeing ownership. Take that for what it is. Jalen Wells, low points per minute guy, someone I never love getting exposure to, but just like Vince Williams, pops a little bit in the sim model. Just someone I didn't want to be completely without. I'm going to be under the field on him, but I put a 20% min just to make sure he showed up a little bit. Really cheap for the minutes he plays, but he doesn't do a lot while he's out there kind of guy. And he shows up in 27% of lineups, so I'm close to field weight exposure, but not over the field. Like I said, just kind of another lineup filler here. The guy, though, the guy is Ty Jerome. He came back for his first game on Saturday. I know some people were nervous to play him. He was on a minutes limit, but he still played 19 minutes coming out, which is still relatively high for him. At some points this season, we've seen him play less than that, like 16, 17 minutes. I think that's his range of outcomes is anywhere from like 16 to 19 minutes. But what I like about Ty Jerome is he's a high points per minute guy. I played a shit ton of him on Saturday because I was like, yeah, even if he's limited, he's going to go out there and ball because they don't really have anyone else who will be as aggressive as he will be. So there's risk here, but he's still only 4K, which makes him one of my favorite studs on the slate. DS likes him too. He's showing up in 53% of lineups, and I always like that 50 range. That's why I don't have too many core plays these days, because if someone's in 53% of my lineups, I'm in a really good situation if they crush, but my night's not over if he fails. So it feels like a nice little happy medium there. And then I get the KCP play, but I'm not going to force it. And he shows up in 3% of lineups, so I'll take it. But I didn't do anything to force that. All right. Let's see here. Last game on the slate, 218.5 total, 1 point spread, 2 average to slightly above average defenses here, which is much better than the other 2 game environments. Late game, So there is that. We might have to, wait around for a little bit to see how we're actually doing tonight. I'm sure there'll be a ton of tilting until this game starts. One of those, I went to sleep angry and I lost, and then I woke up and I won type of scenarios. Wagwan, Kevin, good to see you. Tattoo, appreciate you, man. Showtime said, seems like JJ had good games against Minnesota. He has. He had let me see. Memphis, Jaren Jackson Jr. Last time he faced Minnesota was on the 17th of December. He had a 56-pointer, which was a pretty strong performance for him. He hasn't played them outside of that game this season, though. So he has shown that he can have a strong game against this defense. I don't know the exact situation of that game, though, to be honest. Rodney said, last man in, Smith or McDaniels? Let's see. Jabari Smith, 6,400. McDaniels is 6K. I would lean Jabari Smith. I just trust his minutes a bit more. They're very similar plays. So, good question. If there were still Q tags in that Minnesota game, I would have gone McDaniels, but I'll go Smith for a head-to-head. All right, let's get to these Sixers. So, for the Sixers, we have the news that Paul George is out. So, relevant. I'll go through the list. I'll go through the list of guys who see a boost of him out. We should see Dominic Barlow start in this spot, and then big usage boost to Maxine and Embiid primarily, but we have seen guys like VJ Edgecombe and Kelly Oubre have strong performances before while he's out as well. For me, I have a 30% min on Joel Embiid, but he's not showing up that much. I even boosted his projection a little bit. He's only showing up in 6% of lineups. I like Alperen Şengün so much on this slate, and Joel Embiid has been so chalky lately, and he's been really good. I'm okay with this fade. It's not by my choice. I would love to see Joel Embiid show up a lot, but he's not, and I'm just going to pick my battles on this 3-gamer. I'm going to be over the field on almost everybody else in this game. That my thought process is being under on the chalkiest guy. I never really see it as a bad thing, so I'm okay with that. I do have a 20% min on Maxey, and Maxey is actually showing up in 29% of lineups. So a little bit of leverage there, which I like. And Maxey hasn't been the best recently. He's been pretty disappointing. He had the strong game against Sacramento. He still has that 60-point upside, which I like to see. But then, like against the Pelicans, he only had 40 points. The Bucks on the 27th, only 39.75 points. He's been disappointing. But with PG out, that's always kind of like a call for me to go back to Maxey. Or whenever anybody's out for this team, I'm always willing to go back to Maxey. So there's risk because of the inconsistency he's had here recently, but I still like the upside. BJ Edgecombe, pretty meh on, to be honest. I have a 10% min on him, primarily just because Paul George is out, and I know he has upside, and I don't want to be on the outside looking in if he has one of those games he goes off in. He's showing up in 7% of lineups with that 10% min. At least he's showing up. That's enough for me to be okay with it. All right. And then Kelly Oubre, I have a 5% min on, kind of like VJ Edgecombe. I've seen him pop off without Paul George. 3-game slate, just want exposure to low-owned guys who have that ability. And so I have a 5% min on him, and he's showing up in 5% of lineups. Quentin Grimes, very similar situation. I never love playing Quentin Grimes, but like the potential upside. You don't have to play Quentin Grimes. I would almost recommend you not. But when I'm playing 150 lineups, I just like to put some of these weird high upside guys in there, even when they haven't shown us real upside in forever. So just a 5% min there, nothing too wild. I wouldn't do that in a 20 max. It's pretty unnecessary. And then Barlow, he shows up naturally in about 5% of lineups. Because I'm so high on Ty Jerome, just not someone I have to have a ton of exposure to, but he is a viable 3K option on this slate. He does typically just do a lot of cardio. He's a cardio machine. Doesn't really do too much while he's out there on the court, But again, he will be starting and will be on the court, so not someone you have to X out of your lineups if you see him showing up. And then last but not least, I love the Clippers tonight, man. When I tell you that most of my lineups are with these guys, they scare the hell out of me. I mean, they're not consistent, so I won't lie to you and tell you that. But without James Harden, the usage rates jump for Kawhi Leonard and Zubac. And then the other guys are all pretty much the same in my head, at least from like a DFS scoring potential perspective. But there's low owned upside here that I want exposure to. John Collins is very chalky, and he's so chalky in this last game in a soft matchup, and the sim model liked him too. I was willing to at least match field weight. I put a 45% min on him. Ooh, I think I just realized I'm not seeing. Oh, no, he's there. Jordan Miller's going to be a leverage play for me tonight. 15% min. No James Harden. Getting almost no ownership. His minutes consistency is not that high, but he's one of the better points per minute players on this team outside of Kawhi and Zubac. On a 3-game slate, I'm really to bet on someone who's has a higher usage, higher PPM, but minutes can get a little inconsistent. If anyone gets into any sort of foul trouble, Jordan Miller should benefit. Already with Harden off the court, Jordan Miller will benefit because he has more shots available to him. Typically, he has 30, 35 point upside, even when Harden plays, when his shot is going. But I like the likelihood of him being able to do that without James Harden. Super risky. That's why he's low owned, but it's a reasonable play for me. Again, one of the teams not going up against an elite defense. I just like the play. I almost increased the 15%, but he's not cheap anymore, so price tag made sense. After that, Chris Dunn, Kobe Sanders absolutely suck. They are so bad. But James Harden isn't there, so they still see a usage rate increase, and their minutes floor is a bit more stable for their price tag. Chris Dunn, Kobe Sanders, two guys who go out there and do shit all 9 times out of 10. But we got to hope and pray that they are a little bit more aggressive without James Harden there. That's it. They just make sense from a DFS perspective, given their price tag, given our lack of real value on this slate. They're not guys that I want to go too crazy on. Like if you're seeing 60% of Chris Dunn and Kobe Sanders, cap their ass because that is insane. But I like having exposure to this team just because of the game environment. You could even talk me into Batum here. He will see 20 plus minutes at 3,400, but that points per minute rate is so low. I can't do it, but I can understand it. When we look at who's actually showing up, Kawhi Leonard, I have in 60% of my lineups. I boosted his projection too. He's my favorite stud on the slate, and it's not even close. Maybe with Şengün, it's kind of close. But I really like him without James Harden in a matchup that's not overly complicated. So 60% min there, and I'm not really going to overthink it. We know Kawhi can go ghost sometimes, but hopefully not tonight. I have a 20% min on Zubac, and he's showing up in 11% of lineups. Let me look a little bit closer at this. This is one of those spots I might tinker with because I do like Zubac a good amount. And I would prefer he shows up at least closer to field weight exposure. Going up against Embiid is tough, though. It's not a soft matchup. And, like, I need to look at what other centers are showing up instead of him. Guys like John Collins, Jay Huff, and then Zubac. Golly, no, okay, I'm boosting it. I'm boosting it. Let me look at some recent production. It's hard to look at teams who've gone up against the Sixers and just trying to get an idea of how teams or guys have done against the Sixers because Embiid has rarely played. So you don't really know when he played or when he hasn't. It is a tough matchup, but I'm still going to boost him a little bit and see if I can get him to show up a little bit more than 11%. Let's see, what are y'all saying? Who do you think will start? Let me see. I don't know off the top of my head who typically starts for the Clippers, but right now I have Chris Dunn and Kobe Sanders starting at the 1 and 2. Darius said, do you like both more than Maxey? When you say both, who are you? Are you thinking Kawhi and Şengün? Yeah, I like Kawhi and Şengün more than Maxey. Maxey falls into that third spot for me, though, if I was ranking all the studs. Miller or Coward? Coward's a better play than Miller, 1 for 1. Crap, I forgot what I was doing. Oh, yeah, Zubac, making sure he showed up more. All right, I boosted his projection to 38. Now he's showing up in 34% of lineups. That's a little aggressive. Let me make sure Embiid's still showing up. 4%. Dang, he keeps falling and falling. Nothing I can really do about that at this point. Maybe I'll play around and do like a 52-point projection on him. It made J Huff fall to around 13%. I'm going to move him back to 51. Like I said, got to stick to those fades, even if I like them. Amon fell. What's happening to make these guys fall for me? At point guard, I have so much Reed Shepherd, Ty Jerome, a lot of Maxey. And then there's Chris Dunn, TJ McConnell. Issue is, I would just like to see Amon a little bit higher. Andrew Nembhard, did he fall off too? Yeah. 3-gamers, I am usually okay with fighting the DS a bit more than usual. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. I always say, like, do what you need to do and what wins for you. For me, fighting has helped me win sometimes. So I increased Embiid to 52. I'm increasing Nembhard to 38 to see how that works because the sim model liked him. And then I like where Zubac is showing up. I like where Kawhi is. I'll increase Kawhi to 50. I just want him to be at least in more than 50% of my lineups. Those are my stands, are like Şengün, Kawhi. Reed Shepherd, I'm okay with because I like that game. Tari Eason, 59% of lineups. So interesting spots here. I'm just making some adjustments until I see what I want in the DS. So I'll just stay live until everything goes the way I want it to. Let's see. Are we missing anyone? Another thing I like to do is just kind of see who's going overlooked. Siakam's going overlooked for good reason. We tried to force that, but I don't care enough about him to not do that. Rudy Gobert, Jock Landale, Cam Spencer. These are just like low-owned guys who aren't seeing ownership, but none of them are really interesting to me. Kelly Oubre, I like that he's going overlooked. I like that I have some exposure to him. Yeah, I don't really feel like I'm missing anyone else there. Miller's a fun leverage play I like at low ownership. Good. Okay. So that all shapes up well. But when we come to actual exposures, we have Reed Shepherd, Şengün, Tari Eason in that third spot. He's not moving at all, which is fine. Ty Jerome's in 50% of lineups, which is ideal. Then we have Collins and Randall, which I like. Kawhi is still showing up in only 47% of lineups, but that's still a lot of leverage. So I tried, but I won't boost him any more than that. Sanders is now right around field weight, which is ideal because he is a risky play. Coward, we're over the field on. Zubac is now showing up in 30% of lineups. I like that. Tyrese Maxey, we're still over the field on, which kind of fits that third stud ranking, which is nice. Kobe Brown starting. Let me see. Kobe Brown. Does that move anything for me? 3K Kobe Brown at forward? I haven't seen that report, I don't think, that Kobe Brown is starting. Where'd you see it? Because that would shift some stuff if that's true. All right, we have Maxie Wells, Jaden McDaniels, Vince Williams, Jabari Smith, Andrew Nimbard is now showing up double the field. So nice little leverage play once again. Chris Dunn, just around field weight exposure. TJ McConnell, I don't think we talked about TJ too much, but he's another value option that's nice to have. So being over the field on him is not bad to me on a small slate. He's another guy who just doesn't see consistent minutes. Jordan Miller, still a leverage play. Amon's only showing up in 12% of lineups. That's scary. I don't love that, but can't play everybody. Jay Huff, we're still double the field on. Looks like his projection went down a little bit too. Getting leverage on Huff is good enough. That was not on purpose. Joel Embiid, 8%. Going to be under on him. Under on DiVincenzo, Anthony Edwards. Those are the guys. This group right here could hurt me a lot on this slate. Kelly O, we forced exposure to. BJ Edgecombe is another one that's a little scary to fade, but can't play everybody. And then Rudy Gobert. Yeah, I like the way this shapes up. I have exposure to the guys I feel strongly about, and then the rest are just going to have to fall as they lay. Like Trendon Watford. I didn't look at him too much. Let me see. Let's see. Trendon Watford. Sixers. I like that game. 3,300 value play. Let's see what the sim thinks. How much is he? 3,300. Yeah, sim likes him a little bit. I mean, likes Ty Jerome a lot more, but different position. We'll see. How's he been doing lately? He hasn't scored more than 20 fantasy points in a while, but at 3K, what is he? No, he's 3.3. So ideally, he would at least 6x. So we need 19.8. He did do that last time out against the Pelicans. Really soft matchup, though, so kind of hard to touch or count that one. He did have a strong game against Miami back in November. Don't love Watford, but maybe you see something I don't. Never going to tell you not to do it, but I don't plan on getting there. I think that's going to be it, guys. Interesting slate. Like I keep saying, I can't play everybody. Have to take a couple of stands here, but we'll see. I was trying to see if that Kobe Brown news was true, man, but I don't think I've seen it come through yet. I'll check one more time. Rockets, Pacers. Yeah, I just haven't seen that Clippers starting lineup. If that ends up being true, he would be a viable play, very viable play, value play in particular. And that's one thing we didn't touch on is I also like having exposure to this last game and forcing exposure to guys like Chris Dunn, Kobe Sanders, Quentin Grimes, Kelly Oubre, because it just gives me more late swapping options. If we do get a really weird random like Kobe Brown starting, I can easily late swap to a guy like that and then be able to get that exposure to Joel Embiid or Ant or even more Zubox if we do get more really good value if there's a surprise starter in a situation like that. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But that's going to be it, y'all. Wish you nothing but luck. If you do well, let us know. But on the NBA site, that's not always up to date. So be careful with that one. But it could be right. So we'll see. But yeah, that's going to be it. I'll be back tomorrow with B-dubs, I think. And then Madness will be back on Thursday. So should be a good week. We ended last week strong. Let's keep it going. Peace out. Goodbye, y'all.